Welcome back to Dr. Liu's VCE Biology. Today's topic is changes in species over time, as presented in the 2025 VCE Biology exam. Let's learn together. If teachers, parents, or students notice mistakes in my explanations, please provide me with your feedback. In 2007, a single colony of Asian honeybees, Apis cerana, was accidentally introduced into Australia via a port in Queensland. Honeybee queens typically mate with up to 10 males during a short period early in life and use the stored sperm to fertilize eggs over their lifetime. The queen in the introduced colony was already carrying sperm from matings in her native environment. Upon arrival, the queen continuously laid eggs, producing offspring. Other bees in the initial colony did not produce fertilized eggs. Over time, new colonies were established. The bees expanded to an estimated 10,000 to 50,000 colonies within a decade. Scientists believe the introduction of the Asian honeybee into Australia is an example of the founder effect. Referring to genetic changes, state what the founder effect is and why the scientists are correct. The highlighting is founder effect. To answer the question, we should refer to the question stem. 1. Identify the numerical constraints. The stem often provides numbers to emphasize how small the starting genetic base is. Key detail: a single colony was accidentally introduced. Application: students should highlight single colony to justify why the founder effect is the correct mechanism. It proves the starting population was extremely small. 2. Trace the source of variation. In genetics questions, always look for who is actually passing on their DNA. Key detail: the queen was already carrying sperm from matings in her native environment. Key detail: other bees in the initial colony did not produce fertilized eggs. Application: students must realize that the worker bees in that first colony are a genetic dead end. The entire future gene pool of the Australian population is limited to the queen's genome and the specific sperm she carried. 3. Distinguish between population size versus genetic diversity. The stem provides a trap by mentioning the population grew to 50,000 colonies. Key detail: the bees expanded to an estimated 10,000 to 50,000 colonies within a decade. Application: students should be taught that population growth is not equal to genetic recovery. Even with 50,000 colonies, the genetic diversity remains low because they all originated from that one queen. Many students focus on the large current number and forget that the original founder event is what dictates the allele frequencies. How to write the final answer. We use syllogism. Major premise: the general biological rule. The founder effect occurs when a small, isolated group establishes a new population, resulting in a gene pool with reduced genetic variation and unrepresentative allele frequencies compared to the original source. Minor premise: the specific case evidence. The introduction of Asian honeybees to Australia involved only a single colony, where the only source of heritable DNA was a single queen and her stored sperm. Conclusion: the scientific verdict. Therefore, the scientists are correct because the Australian honeybee population possesses a limited genetic sample that does not reflect the full diversity of the native environment. Logic check. If the minor premise, the evidence from the stem, fits into the major premise, the definition, the conclusion is unavoidable. The genetic anchor. By including unrepresentative allele frequencies in the major premise, students are forced to address the genetic change requirement that the examiners noted was frequently missing. Stem integration. It teaches them that the minor premise must always be extracted directly from the question stem. In VCE biology, the what is the founder effect. The why is the movement of a non-representative sample of alleles. If they don't describe the change in the gene pool, they are describing a change in geography, not a change in biology. Compared to the initial colony, the bees in the new colonies showed an improved ability to gather food and organize their colonies. Scientists investigated their DNA and discovered 481 differences from the original colony of Asian honeybees that had been introduced into Australia. Identify the process responsible for these DNA differences and explain how this process contributed to the successful expansion of the colonies. One, identify the trigger phrase for mutations. Students often jump to natural selection because they see the word improved. However, they must look at what was physically discovered. Key detail, discovered 481 differences from the original colony. The extraction, the word differences in a DNA sequence is a code for new genetic material. The biological link. Students should be taught that only mutations can create brand new DNA sequences, or alleles. Natural selection only sorts what is already there. 2. Spot the selective pressures. The stem describes specific functional improvements that represent a change in phenotype. Key detail, improved ability to gather food and organize their colonies. The extraction, these are not just random changes, they are advantageous traits. The biological link, this information tells the student why the expansion was successful. These traits provided a selective advantage, meaning those bees were more likely to survive and reproduce. 3. Connect time to population change. The stem compares two distinct points in time, the initial colony versus the new colonies. The extraction, this indicates a shift in the population over generations. The biological link, this confirms that the favorable alleles created by mutations were passed on, leading to an increased proportion of individuals with those alleles in the expanded population. Three-mark breakdown for students. Students can use this syllogistic logic to ensure they hit all 3 marking points required by the examiners. Identify the process, 1 mark. Explicitly name mutations as the source of the 481 DNA differences. Explain the variation, 1 mark. State that these mutations changed the DNA base sequence to produce new alleles, some of which provided a selective advantage, e.g., better foraging. Link to expansion, 1 mark. Explain that bees with these advantageous alleles were selected for, leading to increased survival and reproduction rates, which allowed the favorable alleles to spread through the expanding population over time. Key warning for students. As highlighted in the official comments, natural selection and genetic drift do not create DNA differences. They only change the frequency of existing alleles. If a question asks for the responsible process for new DNA differences, the answer must be mutation. Major premise, the source of variation. Mutations are the only process responsible for creating new alleles by altering the base sequence of DNA, thereby increasing the genetic diversity of a population. Minor premise, the specific adaptive advantage. In the Australian environment, specific mutations occurred that resulted in advantageous traits, such as an improved ability to gather food and organize colonies. Conclusion, the mechanism of expansion. Therefore, individuals possessing these favorable alleles had a higher chance of survival and reproduction, allowing natural selection to increase the frequency of these alleles over generations and facilitate the successful expansion of the colonies. Extracting key information from the stem. Students should be trained to scan the stem for environmental selection pressures and identify how they act on the population. Key detail. Compete with native species for resources, take over important nesting sites. The extraction. This identifies the specific selection pressure, competition for food and habitat. Key detail. Threat to native honeybee colonies that are managed for agriculture. The extraction. This signals a potential reduction in population size for the native species. Key detail. Explain the potential genetic change. The extraction. This is a direct instruction to discuss allele frequencies and genetic diversity, not just population numbers. Model answer and marking breakdown, 3 marks. To secure full marks, the response must link the pressure to the genetic outcome. Identify the pressure, 1 mark. State that Asian honeybees act as a selection pressure by competing for resources like food and nesting sites. Explain the selection process, 1 mark. Explain that native bees lacking advantageous traits for competition are less likely to survive and reproduce. State the genetic consequence, 1 mark. Conclude that this leads to a decrease in genetic diversity or a change in allele frequencies, as disadvantageous alleles are removed from the gene pool. Use the word alleles. The official comments highlight that simply saying bees died is an ecological observation. But explaining that alleles were lost is a biological explanation of genetic change. The syllogism of genetic change. Using a syllogism helps students avoid Lamarckian pitfalls, the incorrect idea that bees change in order to survive, by emphasizing that selection acts on pre-existing variation. Major premise: natural selection. Environmental selection pressures act on pre-existing genetic variation, causing individuals with disadvantageous alleles to have lower survival and reproductive rates. Minor premise: the native bee context. The introduction of Asian honeybees creates intense competition for resources, meaning native bees with less efficient foraging or nesting traits are selected against. Conclusion: the genetic result. Therefore, the native bee population will experience a reduction in genetic diversity as disadvantageous alleles decrease in frequency, or are lost entirely from the gene pool. Q7a Founder Effect, 2 marks. Define. A small group establishes a new population with reduced genetic variation and unrepresentative allele frequencies. Apply. Only one queen plus stored sperm equals entire gene pool from a single colony. Trap. Population growth, 50,000 colonies, does not equal genetic recovery. Q7b Mutations, 3 marks. Process. Mutations are the only source of new DNA sequences for alleles. Advantage. Some mutations led to improved foraging and colony organization. Selection. Natural selection increased the frequency of favorable alleles over generations. Key warning: natural selection and genetic drift do not create new DNA differences. Q7c Selection Pressure, 3 marks. Pressure. Asian honeybees compete for resources and nesting sites. Outcome. Native bees with disadvantageous alleles are selected against. Genetic change. Reduced genetic diversity and changed allele frequencies in the native population. Key tip: use alleles saying bees died is ecology, not genetics. Exam strategy: use the syllogism framework, major premise, definition, plus minor premise, stem evidence, equals conclusion. If you need my help, please add me on WeChat or WhatsApp and send me an email. Thanks for your attention. Please note Dr. Liu's VCE Physics channel, Dr. Liu's VCE Chemistry channel, and Dr. Liu's VCE Biology channel.